So, good evening. Welcome to another edition of Globespan 24x7, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh. Our techie operator is Mr. Devin Bissoon. We are discussing tonight racial dilemma or race dilemma in Guyana and proposed solutions. Before I introduce the guests, we do have a very brief video on Juneteenth.
What is Juneteenth? Juneteenth is the oldest known celebration commemorating the ending of slavery in the United States. President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing enslaved Africans in the United States in 1862, and the 13th Amendment passed Congress, officially abolishing the institution of slavery in 1863. But it would take years for word to spread. On June 19, 1865, Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger landed at Galveston, Texas, with the news that the Civil War was over and the roughly 250,000 enslaved people there were now free.
Thank you. Well, in brief, it's the equivalent of Emancipation Day that we celebrate in Guyana on August 1st, or throughout the rest of the region as well, although the dates are different in the rest of the Caribbean region. So Juneteenth was last Sunday, the 19th, and it being a Sunday, it was celebrated on Monday, which is a federal holiday in the United States. So gentlemen, again, welcome. With us tonight are four esteemed gentlemen who are no strangers to this program, Globespan 24x7. Professor Dr. Henry Jeffrey, former government minister and a columnist in Guyana. Professor Blackman, who is a professor of mathematics at Medgar Evers College, part of the CUNY system in New York City. Mr. Ravi Dev, who has written extensively on various issues pertaining to race and who is also a columnist and a media consultant in Guyana. And Professor Baytoram Ramharack, who teaches social sciences in the SUNY system. Welcome again, gentlemen. We are discussing, quote unquote, racial dilemma and proposed solutions in Guyana. So we'll begin first. What do we mean by racial dilemma, if I may engage Professor Henry Jeffrey first?
Thank you very much. Let me say by racial dilemma, I think we mean the incapacity of the races to live in a fashion over, let's say, the last 60, 70 years in a fashion that would lead to equitable and development in Guyana. What we have had over the last 60 years has been continuous bickering over racial ethnic problem. I prefer the ethnic situation because the term ethnicity rather than race, largely because I believe that's where we are standing now in terms of the division in Guyana. But over that period, over the last 70 years, we have not been able, given all our resources, everything we have. We have decent human, look at Professor Blackman and all the other people abroad. We have decent human, natural resources, and yet we are one of the poorest countries in the hemisphere. We have been unable to do that, to build an effective democratic system in Guyana. And when I think that is the dilemma we face. Today we have oil, and there's much talk about oil and and all of that. But as we bicker, the people, I'm not going to use terms like imperialists, but the people who owns the oil essentially are doing what they like with it. We are caught in a situation where we are getting 2% and all of this, and instead of us focusing as a country, as a nation, on dealing with these issues, we are fighting politics. We are fighting each other. So I believe that's how I see what is the dilemma. The dilemma is that we are continuously in conflict, unable to properly sit down and manage the system to bring our people the kind of prosperity they deserve.
Professor Baytoram Ramharack, how would you describe, define, explain the racial dilemma, ethnic dilemma?
Well, to add on to what Henry was saying, we've actually used the term ethnic security dilemma, which is a concept we've kind of invoked to describe this racial situation we're dealing with in Guyana. So, we have a country here next door, for instance, Suriname, where people of different ethnicity, right? You have three major ethnic communities that live together. I mean, you have the kind of absence of the kind of conflicts we have in Guyana that we would see during election time. So that dilemma refers to the fact that we seem to have government. If one government is in place, it means the other community happens to be out of place and out of government. So that creates a sort of fear among each of the community. So it comes down to the question of who controls power. We are a divided community. We have two major ethnic groups. Most Guyanese, because of this this ethnic security dilemma, which I would add is different for Africans and also different for Indians. So because of this division we've had for so many years, most Guyanese, right, the bulk of the Guyanese population live outside of Guyana, not inside of Guyana. And we continue to see, this sort of a tit for tat politics. Now, I should add that over the years, the dynamics of this conflict has actually evolved and has changed. For instance, I would argue that it was more intense when Indians were a majority in the country, because of the long years of dictatorship under the PNC rule. The majority of Indians, or a large chunk of them, have actually left the country. And of course, other groups have left. Africans have also left. But that majority has disappeared. So my point here today is that dynamics, that sort of an ethnic security dilemma that we have talked about still exists. But the point is we have a different situation in terms of a demographic change, which also has an impact on this security dilemma. So what I would say in conclusion is that because of this demographic change, we don't have a single group in Guyana that has a majority that can win an election outright, as we had in the past. So when we talk about things like power sharing, for me, this is something I had supported in the past. When Indians were a majority, but I think we have evolved. So power sharing is something that makes absolutely no sense to me today in terms of the way it's been defined. And we can talk about that as we go along, and we can talk about some of the solutions. So in my mind, when we talk about that dilemma, we have to kind of put ourselves in the shoes of the two major ethnic groups that are in competition for political power and the resources that we have in the country. And as I said, we have dubbed that the ethnic security dilemma.
Dr. Terrence Richard Blackman, you want to add, subscribe, delete from that?
No, I think as you played the original, the opening clip around Juneteenth, I was struck, and I think that this is something that this happened in 1862. The emancipation of slavery happened in Guyana in 1838. So this is much earlier. And I think when we talk about the ethnic and racial dilemma that we face, I think we have to understand that in a sense, this is what we've been bequeathed by history. The Dutch colonization from about the 1580s to about 1800. Then the British colonization from about 1800 to 1966 have left us a kind of Guyanese society that is deeply scarred by racial stereotyping and ethnic division. And this is not something that we can, at the end of this colonial era, we are a de facto multiracial, multi-ethnic country, but we're split down along ethnic lines in the political, social, economic terms. And so this is what history has bequeathed to us. And in order to address it, I think we have to, first look at ourselves in the mirror and sort of say, this is where we are, and then kind of begin to envisage where we want to go, and then begin to think about what sort of steps can get us there.
Mr. Ravi
So I'll
there?
pause then. Yeah.
Mr. Ravi there?
Yeah, thank you. Well, Henry talked about us for 60 years. We've been independent. We've been trying to live out what is the meaning of that independence, and we are far from that. And whenever I think about it from that angle, I remember Langston Hughes' poem, A Dream Deferred, and he says, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or does it fester like a sore and then run? And of course he ends, or does it explode? And I think that is the concern that all of us who care about our native land, Guyana, has to consider. What happens when a dream is deferred? We have seen in so many countries what can happen. It can explode. It can explode, and it can destroy the country sometimes. We saw what happened in Yugoslavia, what happened to the Yugoslavian. We've seen what happened in Rwanda. So there are a lot of examples where we should really take care and pay attention to ensure that we do not explode also. Now, in my own personal experience, I returned to Guyana, as we were talking off screen with Professor Blackman. I left America, quit my job, and returned to Guyana in '89. And in 1990, I presented a paper to the three major political parties in Guyana, having analyzed what I saw in Guyana with 20 years of being in America and looking at their experience and bringing some thought to bear into our own situation here. The paper was called For a New Political Culture. And the paper was supposed to be a white paper, so to speak, for a conference that I had suggested. Dr. Jagan agreed. Mr. Malcolm Paris of the PNC agreed. He was the chairman, I believe. But the WPA at that time felt it was not necessary. We have had this out in the paper. They felt that they had resolved the racial dilemma through following the footsteps of Walter Rodney. So they didn't need that. So that was that. There was never any conference. But coming back into the present, very ruefully, I think they would concede that no, that ethnic dilemma was not resolved. As Beto said, we had a specific meaning when we introduced the words ethnic security dilemma in Guyana, because contradictorily, democracy and the introduction of democracy, which we fought for so many years, started by the trade unions and then the political parties, was supposed to resolve our problems. We were going to be in charge of our destiny, masters of our fate and all that. But we saw it didn't do it. So democracy and the introduction of democracy, interestingly enough, precipitated our ethnic security dilemma in Guyana, and we still have not resolved it. So I want to spend just a minute talking about what we mean by the ethnic security dilemma. Because Indians were a numerical majority in Guyana, majoritarianism meant that if they voted ethnically, which all the voting before the 60s had shown, then they can vote their party, the PPP, into power in perpetuity. And they would then lock out Afro-Guyanese, who would tell you they've slaved for this country, to build this country, and all that means, literally slaved to build it. And that was unacceptable. So the Indian majority, however, we pointed out, had their dilemma. Yes, they could take office, but they would be always precariously holding on to power because all the state institutions, the army, the police, the bureaucracy, everything was in the hands of their opponents. So they always had to take that into consideration. We call it the principle of anticipated reaction. They also worry, what them gonna say? What will they do? For African Guyanese, therefore, their ethnic security dilemma was that if they went along with the rules of majoritarian democracy, then they're out forever. And it was that fear, that dilemma, that Mr. Burnham exploited or used it rationally from his standpoint to hold on to power. And again, I want to say we still have not resolved that. I think I've used up my time at this point, and I will come back to some of the 9 proposals we made in that paper for a new political culture.
Now, Professor Blackman had started to talk about some of the problems, issues related to the racial dilemma. So I wonder if Professor Jeffrey, Dr. Jeffrey, can you elaborate on what are some of the consequences, problems, issues arising out of the racial dilemma in Guyana?
Could you say ethnic dilemma, please, Vishnu?
Oh, ethnic dilemma, yes.
Please.
Yeah. First of all, let me say this, that the question, yes, at one point, was that the Indo-Guyanese had a majority. But they have, for all intents and purposes, lost that majority. But the ethnic dilemma does not end simply because one party loses the majority and the other party can join with a small minority party and win elections. Once you have an ethnic group that is about 40% around the world, right in America, you're seeing it, the European population is now just going to 40-45%, and there you see what's happening on the Trump era. Once you have a population that's about 40% of the population of the nation, they will not sit idly by and let you win and let you rule, largely because you can, for instance, get a minority, win a minority of the vote, and have a small minority party to carry you over the majority. It's not going to happen. It has happened nowhere. The result is that the dilemma is not simply a matter of majority has changed and therefore you don't have a problem. You have a problem once you have what you have, that 40% existential threat, that they are going to mobilize. It is not, again, just a matter of a cultural kind of indoctrination. Once you have a 40% in a competitive democratic system, they are going to be mobilized against you. And they are going, regardless or not, if you end up with 51% or 52%, they are going to be mobilized. And once you have them outside there, you cannot run a proper democratic system. That is where the notion of sharing power comes in. It is not simply that you have crossed the border of you are below 50, you got 45, and then you can come with a small party and say, well, let them join a small party, let them work with a small party and get 51. It's not going to happen. It has never happened. And the result is you have to accommodate, once you start reaching the 40% line, both people have to accommodate each other. That is where the sharing of power makes sense. Not simply this notion that you can win 49 and get 1% from somebody else. That is what we have in Guyana today. The Indians might be 40-something percent. The blacks might be 40. The Afro-Guyanese ethnicity might be 40-something percent, but none of them, you can leave them out of the governance structure and properly administer Guyana by finding a small party somewhere and say, we have a majority. That, I believe, is the crux of the matter in Guyana today.
All right, let's hear Professor Ramharack. What do you see as some of the problems, consequences of the racial dilemma in Guyana?
Well, let me just say a couple of things first. There's a lot of things that Henry has written, and it's all out there in the public. And I know he's been pushing a dead horse, which we call power sharing. But I'll talk about that in a second. But hopefully, our professor from Medgar Evers can come up with a mad solution to help us, because we do have a lot of people in Guyana who apparently have problems counting numbers. But let's come back to this question about this 40%. And I think what Professor Jeffrey is doing here, he's creating a dilemma of his own. We've talked about the problem of Indians being a majority, where in an electoral competition, they will always win. That is not the case today. But now he wants to focus on, let's assume that the Indian population is 40%, which it could be less than that. The Amerindians and the mixed grouping are the two fastest growing population in Guyana. So the one single fact that debunks Henry's proposition here, or argument, is the fact that we had an election in 2015 and an opposing party won the election. And if you go back to the election before that, their numbers were also dwindling. Now, that's one issue. The second issue is that if we're saying that, well, it doesn't matter if a small party gains, 3 or 5 seats in parliament. It is possible that if a party gains 3 or 5 seats in parliament, in fact, Henry was part of a political party, ANUG. In a letter that Ralph Ramkaran wrote in Starbuck News, he made the argument that if ANUG gains about 3 to 5 seats in parliament, they could be that sort of power broker. Now, all of us were hoping that the power broker would have been the AFC. But of course, they didn't have I guess you could say, the fortitude to kind of take positions that would make them into that power broker. They kind of pretty much catapulted and allowed the PNC to swamp everything in sight. So my point is that, when we talk about power sharing, I think what Henry's doing, he's hanging his hat on something that Arthur Lewis had written before, where he makes the argument around 2 facts. One is that the people who are being affected by policies have to play a role in shaping those policies. But Arthur Lewis also did say, well, first to begin, people can shape that policy by not necessarily being part of that government in terms of ruling. They can be part of the opposition. That's how we shape policy. But Arthur Lewis did also make the argument that the majority should always prevail, and that is what happened in 2015. So my basic point here is that political parties in Guyana today can compete in an open field, and the best party should win the election. We see that in 2015, and we see it in 2020. So all of a sudden, we're now going back when the PNC was in office, APNU, for 5 years. This whole notion of power sharing was not audible, but all of a sudden it's there now, and it's becoming more and more vibrant. Now, I'm not saying that we should not have a system of sharing, but you can't have a system where political parties, in a sense, coalesce to be part of a government and there is no opposition. You can have something like APNU and AFC. But I'm getting to a situation where I believe there are other mechanisms we can adopt to ensure that we don't have this sort of competitive politics as we see in Guyana, which is always played out during electoral times. And one of them that we have been pushing so often is something called an ethnic impact statement. In fact, by the way, Arthur Lewis did also talk about sharing of power in terms of a distribution from the center to the local. He talked about federalism, something that we had actually pushed in the old days. But we can talk more about a solution. But I do want to debunk this whole notion about the fact that you have to have power sharing, and this is what it means in my mind. Maybe it's different for Henry. I mean, he can comment on that. But I think, judging from his writing, this is what I gathered from what he's saying, and I think that's a kind of a system that's not going to work in Guyana, because you're now saying, okay, you won the election, but now you have to share the power. It doesn't work like that.
Before we have comments on that, just for clarification, Professor Arthur Lewis was the Nobel Prize winner in economics out of St. Lucia, if I'm not mistaken, and as taught in several of the islands, was professor, I think, at UWI as well, and in the United States as well. So, Professor Blackman, you have anything to add to what these esteemed gentlemen have commented on about?
Yes, first I wanted to say kudos to St. Lucia. They're the Caribbean country with two Nobel laureates,
Two Nobel, yes, yeah,
and Derek Walcott. So they must be doing something good there. I think really the question is, what's the conflict in Guyana? And I think Professor Henry Jeffries and the commenter just really kind of identified what the key. So governance. So I'm going to list what I think are the key things. So governance, please. The right to govern, practice governance, the sort of winner take all, and I think what was just being articulated is not shared, maybe not shared governance, but some kind of consensual paradigm that allows for a broader participation in the governmental structure. So that's the first one. I think the second thing is about leadership. Thus far, we've not seen someone with the vision that can unite people around the vision of a prosperous Guyana. There's this magnanimity that you need, a certain kind of statesmanship. Thus far, none of our political leaders have managed during the various tenures in office to devise a political program that would encourage interaction across communities. The political culture. So inability of political parties to sort of rid themselves of the perception of race-based politics, and the failure to sort of respond constructively to, proactively to mutually seeking some kind of benefiting win-win situations. So there's no conversation. Mistrust coming out of the history, inability to trust the motives of and the contributions of people other than the people who are in your own group. I mean, we have to be honest in the conversation. And I think this is overcoming these hurts of the past, slavery, colonialism, politically motivated violence that was mentioned. These things have left deep scars on our Guyanese psyche. And we haven't had like a truth and reconciliation committee like South Africa, but maybe we need something like this. And I think the other aspect of this is sort of like the inequality. So socioeconomic inequality, and this poverty kind of affects all groups, but often what happens, and if we're honest about the discussions, people perceive the cause of their poverty to be the actions of people in other ethnic groups, right? And so I think governance, leadership, political culture, the mistrust, overcoming the past hurts, and sort of the much inequality in the socioeconomic injustices and poverty. I think these are the sort of areas that exacerbate our conflict. And I don't think, in a way, I don't think that the racial dimension is as pronounced. I think if we were to poll Guyanese, and there's an organization in Vanderbilt that does sort of polling, I think it's called LAPOP. LAPOP. And if you were to poll Guyanese, and they say, well, what's the most serious problem faced by the country? Economy, security, basic services. Politics would come lower down. And very rarely, I've looked at these surveys, very rarely do we see the problem that is the most challenging for Guyana is race. So I think it's these aspects that are exacerbated by the racial dimension, exacerbated by history, that cause us to be in this sort of trap where, as you noted, the question is whether or not 33 is a majority of 65, someone pointed out, and we had a lot of difficulty, very smart people had a lot of difficulty noting that perhaps 33 is indeed the majority of 65. So the fact that we spent 5 months and had to go to many, many people in order to answer this question gives us a sense of how challenging your ethnic security dilemma is.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Pause there.
Yeah, yeah.
colleagues.
Thank you for itemizing, identifying those issues and problems associated with race. That is the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed, and I'm very pleased that you have identified them. Let's talk a little about solutions.
Oh no, could I have my 2
Yes,
cents
please,
first,
please,
Vishnu?
please, Mr. Dev. Yeah.
Vishnu, could I have my 2 cents
Yes.
first?
Yeah, please.
Geez, I thought I was in this conversation here. I don't know, the Guyanese in Guyana are getting left out. Now, I want to be serious about this. Coming back to my thing, I'm not speaking with theory, and I'm just theoretically. I came back here in 1990, and in the last 32 years have done nothing else but to try to work at a grassroots level every single day to see how we can move this process. It might sound arrogant, but it doesn't mean that it had an impact, but at least one is trying. So when I got into Parliament in 2001, we continued to try to implement this new political culture. And part of that, we spent a lot of time between 2004 to 2005 to form what I called a center force. I explicitly named it a center force, where we would talk about Guyana. We would talk, yes, we accepted there were ethnic identities, but we had to develop a civic identity. And I talked about Guyanese-ness. What would Guyanese-ness mean in terms of that civic nationalism that all of us could hold on to? And we talked of course, equality would be the sine qua non of that. We as Guyanese coming out of slavery and indentureship, equality of treatment, equality of opportunity, and all those things would be something. So we went on along those lines, and it might seem dry to talk about those things, but we felt you had to start somewhere. But that went nowhere. And out of that came the AFC, and they were pretty much successful. They had 5 seats, then 7 seats, and they were supposed to be the one that would broker that. So, but what was going on, again, in the background, and in our thinking at least, was that when we talk about power sharing, we hear of consociationalism, this whole putting together of the parties. After the elections, you come together and you sit around the table and, you sing Kumbaya and everything is honky-dory there. And we found out it just hasn't worked. It has worked nowhere on planet Earth. The few places it was tried, the 4 or 5 places, Burundi, it fissioned. Right now, Northern Ireland is in a stalemate. There was a stalemate in their government between 2002, 2007, then between 2017, 2020. Right now, this minute, Sean Fein won, but they can't rule. The DUP said, we ain't voting for what you want before we get what is ours. So the problem is the consociational model of power sharing has not worked, and it ends in what we are seeing called immobilism. It just freezes up because one person will just put their hand up and say, like what is happening in Ireland right now. DUP said, we ain't voting for that until you fix that Brexit problem with our borders and all that. So coming back to what we had put in, our small party is a form of power sharing and had been proposed by Donald Horowitz, and it's called centripetalism, meaning you bring in incentives into the system. You install incentives into the system, like a single transferable vote. So, for example, a person is given 2 votes. You vote for who you like, and then you vote for the one who you afterward, okay, I'll give them a try. So what it's supposed to do is to encourage moderation, because when you pick something from outside your party, someone, it's going to be a moderate. So there are many types of devices in centripetalism to make the 2 parties moderate. But as I pointed out in 2008, and I argued, I don't think Henry took me on, you had Freddie Kissoon, you had David Hines, you had Takuma Ogunseye, you had Lincoln Lewis, you had my friend Eric Phillips. all argued that how dare you, Ravi, say that Indians gonna link up with the PNC? Because I said if the PNC could simply moderate this behavior, they were presenting the argument that the PPP was a elected dictatorship. Therefore, the PNC must come out into the streets. And I said, no, moderate your behavior, reach across the divide, and let's see what happens. And lo and behold, as I learned in Sunday school, yes, Henry, I did go to Sunday school. Lo and behold, 2011 came, and yes, Henry, you're absolutely wrong. There is a place on planet Earth where a party with 40% of the vote, in 2011, they had a draw, and in 2015, they won it. And the sky didn't fall from the sky, even though Donald Ramotar insists that 15 boxes weren't counted by my friend Steve Surajbali, yet they went along. The PNC, governed in a coalition with the AFC, and we cannot just dismiss that as saying, well, oh, you're 40% and you just get in a coalition. That cannot be poo-pooed and washed away. For that to be done, the PNC had to modify its approach. It had to be seen, they actually had to say, okay, sugar workers, we're going to be with you, we'll give you a raise. Now, what happened afterwards is another story, and we'll talk about that. But the point is, Henry, is that centripetalism is a form of power sharing where either one of the two major parties, if they reach across the divide, if they moderate their rhetoric, like the PPP did in 2020, and they won by a whisker. We may differ about how that whisker came about, but they won by a whisker, and they're governing right now. And I see that as a step forward. I want to conclude by saying this, that true centripetalism, if you are rational, unlike Mr. Granger, you don't go and fire 7,000 sugar workers who wouldn't vote for you and whose vote you needed at least 3,000 of them. You should act at least rationally. And if you do that, I think going forward, if we give our new demographics a chance, I think we can have a democratic system. Not going to be perfect. As Kant said, out of this crooked timber, all of us were made. It ain't going to be perfect, but I think it can be workable. Thank you, sir.
I think it's about 8:15 now, and we are expecting two guests, the taxi driver and the gentleman who also left his wallet in the taxi. Devin, are you ready?
Just give us 2 minutes. They'll be right on.
Okay, so in those 2 minutes, I suppose we could hear from Henry Jeffrey. You want to respond to Ravi there? And please keep in mind it's 2 minutes, huh?
I want to respond to all these gentlemen. It's a mouthful, but I would do that. First of all, if Ravi means what's going on now and have been going on for the last 60 years is essentially government, well, that's fine, because that's what will continue under the present system. This is not a system that the people of Guyana are sitting down and making decisions that are in the interest of Guyana. People are making decisions that are in the interest of political parties. You got people coming, using our resources and taking about what is happening in Guyana, been happening for 60 years. If that is what you mean, that, oh, we are being governed and you have a government, well, that's fine, because you can continue with that for the next 60 years. But I was thinking that what you require, or what Guyana requires, is a system in which all the parties will sit down, all the ethnic groups can get together and make decisions in the interest of a nation. You are not going to have that. We did not have that in 2011. We do not have it now, and we did not have it in 2015. So that is not, you can win by even having a minority and essentially collating, as the APNU did, with a minority party. They can win, but still behave in a manner that alienates the entire 40% on the other side. That cannot be considered a progressive move. And your last statement, your last statement when you say that, oh, well, we're going to do it in time. Well, Burnham thought we'll do it in time. Ravi, you know that. Every leader since then thought we will do it in time. I can do it. I can come to power. Chadi Jagan thought he will do it in time. The minute he get into office, problems started. I am saying once you have, I think it's Scott Hoare that calls it the 40% existential threat. The minute you have that number of people out there, the minute they are out there, they are going to be mobilized in an ethnicity particularly, in an ethnic situation particularly. They are going to be mobilized in general African against the other side. And once they are mobilized against the other side, there will be no unity in governance. All this stuff, you know how you change culture, Ravi, now by having some seminars about changing culture. You change culture essentially by changing the structure of the situation. You allow people to, it must be a dynamic that people can start to live and work together. Once you are not living and working together, you are wasting time. If, as I said before, if you think that what we have had for the last 60 years, and particularly since the turn of the century, is governance, well, maybe we can continue like that. But I think it is not. What we require here, as I said, Scott Hoare pointed out, is for us to sit at the table. Switzerland, what's that? What's that? Switzerland is not ruled by any party that won. Switzerland is run by four parties, the four largest parties in government.
So Henry, if I may interrupt you, we'll come back to it. Let's hear from Joe Ragnar, who's joining us now. Joe, are you hearing us?
Quite well, actually.
Okay, thank you. So Joe is a former Barbadian now living in New York, Long Island, New York. He was head of the support group of the DLM. And so, Joe, welcome. I was wondering now if you have any contribution to make of the topic we're just discussing, as well as you're here really primarily to talk about your experience in riding this taxi from the airport all the way to, is it the quarantine?
No, to Georgetown. First, Vishnu, thank you very much. And I know all the gentlemen. I've met them all physically except Mr. Jeffries, but I've got to know him through his writing as if I physically met him. I know every one of the gentlemen want to make a contribution, made a contribution, and still willing to make a contribution. But my little experience, my little experience from the airport is a story that can be infused into the narrative about what Guyana should be and should. I got a business class ticket from Globespan Travel Service from New York to Georgetown, and in the interim, I was bringing a parcel for someone, so I was able to clear the parcel and give the gentleman at the airport here. And the gentleman that collected the parcel recommended a taxi driver, a Mr. Victor Pauli. So he and I drove up. I landed in the morning, midday, and I got to Georgetown about 3 o'clock. Traffic was horrendous as usual. And I went upstairs, never took his name, but we had good, excellent conversation. And 10 minutes afterwards, I searched my pocket. I had money tucked away. I thought I was smart. I had the money tucked away in the left pants pocket, right pants pocket, and my back pocket where my wallet is. On my left pocket, I had $4,000 $100 bill, US $100 bill from TD Bank, and it's in the same envelope. And I had $1,000 in my right pocket, and I had some loose change in the wallet. So my notion is that if I get lost, I might only lose one pocket, but then I end up losing the $4,000. So when you lose $4,000, I was dropped right here in Georgetown in the street here, and I became frantic. I didn't have the guy's name. And the night went on. I couldn't sleep. I searched the same pants pocket 20 times. It was really funny. So the people who recommended the taxi, I was able to get them to make a call, and I didn't get any answer. And later on in the night, about 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, somebody told me there's no money. I had no hard call the airline, and they searched up the aircraft because I had no idea where the money was lost. So I don't, you only become frantic and crazy. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any money. Didn't call my wife in New York and tell her because I thought I might have had an earful. So I said, I better allow her to have a good night's sleep. In the meantime, I had come for a mission here to dispose ceremoniously my niece's ash from Minnesota and another which I was disposed today, and plus other charitable work like I'm doing for people, like birth certificate, marriage, decree nisi, as they call it, I believe, a lot of things. So I resigned into accepting that the money was gone. So next morning before breakfast, I called my wife and say, honey, I lost $4,000. And I heard a 5-second silence. And then she said, Joe, worst thing happens to people. Well, she said, you could have gotten killed, you could have got hurt. Nobody stole your money, you lost the money. Maybe it meant to be that. And then 10 minutes after, the taxi driver drove up to the house and gave me the money exactly how it is. He didn't say a word. He just whip it out from this pocket, TD Bank. And I was really like in a shock the night before. And then it took a whole 2 days to recover from the loss and to regain the money. So he gave me the money. I didn't count it. I was so elated. I whipped out some money and tried to give it to him. He said, no, 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 no. And this is a burly-looking Guyanese guy. Nice guy, soft-spoken. And I said, wait a minute. You're not going to take any money? He said, no. But I insisted. And he took it, I wouldn't say how much, but I gave him a good amount of money. And he took it, took a picture of him, took his card, and I put it on Facebook. And that sets off a chain reaction. I got so much advice how to hide money, even in the crevices of your body. Even in your crutch, people say how to hide it in your socks. Oh, gosh, you wouldn't know. And people say, I'm careless, I was lucky. But most people were very good. They were very elated that Guyana still has people who could return 4,000 US dollar in $100 bill. And the irony of it all, we were having a conversation with maniacs in the world over with taxi driver, because I told him, and I said, listen, if a man walks down the road in New York and he sees $100 bill, what he does, he picks it up, looks to see if there is more, and puts it in his pocket. But there are a few people who might think it's not his and wanted to return it. That's the kind of conversation I was having with Mr. Victor Pauli, and I was really elated about this gentleman. People call me, ask me for his number. I think he will have more business than you can think of.
So let's hear from him. Mr. Victor Pauli is with us tonight, taxi driver who ferried Joe Ragnott from Timeri Airport to Georgetown. Victor, you want to narrate really your account of what took place?
Yeah, good night, gentlemen. Well, like he said, I dropped him home. And on my way back home, I got a call from the airport that this gentleman is missing some money. So I just looked back where he was sitting, and I didn't see any money. So I told the guy at the airport, I said, man, no money is in this vehicle. So I went home, went into my house, told my wife that this guy lose some money, but I ain't find no money in the bus. I was worried because I was thinking the man won't believe that I said I didn't find any money and all of that. So I took my dinner, bathed, and went back to work. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, I didn't tell him all of this. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I took another job. And I opened the door for the bus to let the passenger in. And when I opened the door, lo and behold, money was on the step of the bus. So when I look back, I couldn't see the money. I just pick it up, put it in my pocket. I said a word to nobody. And I drop off the people, drove around by his house, 1 o'clock in the morning. The place was so dark. I said, I ain't gonna wake up these people at this time. So I went home. I told my wife, I said, man, I find this money. And my wife said, try and get it out of the house as early as possible. So the next morning I wake up, I didn't even bathe. I didn't even take breakfast. Just put on my clothes and I drove back to Mr. Joe's house. And as I parked, I saw him and I walked in the yard and he came down and he said, man, he lost his money thing. And I just pushed my hand in his pocket and take it out and hand it to him. And he couldn't believe it. That's
Okay.
He couldn't believe that I would bring back the money. But it wasn't mine. It's not mine to keep. You know, it's a lot of money for me, but it's not mine.
You didn't earn it, so you didn't want it.
It's not mine. So it's not. I don't want it. That's bad luck.
But you know, some people, some bloggers on the Facebook said Mr. Pauli, Victor Pauli should run for office because he has integrity. Basically, one of the features of man, I believe, we have a tendency to being a kleptomaniac. You find something on the road you want it. People like to forfeit things that are not theirs, and that I was really astonished. And you know, my wife, when I broke the story that I lost the money, she was silent, and then because she said, "Joe, you're a prodigal. You are a spendthrift. You can't even handle money or care money." And I laughed, but I was careless. But it's the good things I believe that you do. It's a kind of a quid pro quo, reciprocity. You do good, you get good. I do a lot of things. My mission here is to bury ashes, retrieve that marriage certificate, marriage, divorce papers, birth certificates, you name it. And I'm doing some research about my family at the archives. So I do a lot of things. So in some sense of the word, I think some of the things, and people who know me, if you read the blogs, they said, Joe, you do so much things in New York. I kept doing, that's part of me. And I come from Mr. Ramaya's 75th birthday, my childhood friend in Wim. So I'll be there on Saturday. And last weekend, he had a function feeding children and seniors as well. So I came to attend all of those things. So I believe there was some compensation due to me. And Mr. Victor Pauli was the man who was sent on this earth to do this thing. I really wish there's no other gentleman I have found here in Guyana yet. Like,
did you get any Facebook response or social media response to Victor Pauli? About Victor Pauli?
The airport called me. They have a public relations thing. They called me and asked me to send my ID, and they shared it. And I think there were about 280,000 viewers and commenting about the money. Some people say I would never get the money, but all sorts of things. And that percentage, but I know that I did give offered and I did give, and Mr. Pauli eventually was more. I could confused when he came back that it took me one day to mourn the loss of the money and one day to recover from the gaining back of the money.
Okay.
Mr.
Pauli, any final comments before you go?
All I have to say, if you find something in your vehicle as a taxi driver, it doesn't belong to you, find the person, give it back.
Even if it's not a taxi driver, in general, I would say, I'll tell you what, I had an experience in Asia, in Bali. I left my computer in the taxi, and the taxi driver brought it back a few hours later to the hotel room. Yeah,
that's good.
And I had the same experience one in China. This is a long time ago, 30 years ago. I left the camera, and the Chinese taxi driver brought it back to me. So you do have good people in this world who would not forfeit things that don't belong to them. Joe? Victor, thank you very much for coming and sharing your experience. Enjoy. I think you have another bash this weekend coming up.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And do give our regards to Dr. Ramaya as well. Gentlemen, we are going to take a break now, and we'll be back after a couple of minutes.
TravelSpan has some very cheap fares for July and August to and from Guyana. Seats are limited, but call TravelSpan today for these discounted low fares in July and August. In New York, call 718-845-0437. That's 718-845-0437. In Georgetown, call 227-1701. That's 227-1701. And in Berbice, call 337-4287. That's 337-4287. For discounted airfares to and from Guyana, call TravelSpan today.
Oman! Hey, Oman!
Oi!
Come that girl, I feel like I see Raymond Ramharack across the road somewhere there.
Raymond who?
Raymond Ramharack, they sing. I girl Ramharack, how you pretend so?
The 2022 TravelSpan Curry Duck Curry Cooking Competition is in Cancun on July 28th to August 1st. Who is going? The duck and the curry going for sure, plus Raymond Ramharack, Terry G, young upcoming dancer and singer Ariana, Randy Reckless, and the Reckless Tassa Group. The competition for the best tasting duck is in Cancun for 2022. Friends and families, make this a reunion. Flights available from New York, Florida, Atlanta, Texas, Trinidad, Guyana, Canada, or any U.S. states. For more info, call TravelSpan at 212-243-0865. In Canada, call 647-557-6200. In Trinidad, call Amerals at 645-1604. And in Guyana, 227-1701, or visit us at travelspan.com.
Are you missing homemade food, snacks, drinks, roti and curries, or have a busy schedule? Then get your favorite curries and roti delivered directly to your home with all from one supplier. Come order your duck, goat, or chicken, fully cooked and ready to eat with dal puri or bus up shut. We also now have chicken tikka masala or lamb vindaloo available with regular naan or garlic naan. Don't forget to add your solo, icy, coconut water, or Nestle drinks to these delicious meals. Select your choice, and load your box and let allfromonesupplier.com deliver directly to your home. All from One Supplier has you covered for all your food. Plus, if you need pepper sauce, curry powders, fish, meat, ghee, and so much more. We also have tasty pastries like pine tarts, cheese rolls, currants rolls, coconut rolls, and so much more. Sales are ongoing every week, and your first order is 10% off once you apply the coupon code Globespan 24x7. Log on to allfromonesupplier.com today and purchase. Allfromonesupplier.com is your one-stop shop for all West Indian items, and remember, it's free shipping to all US states.
Somebody make some noise! Let me go!
Come join us in the Caribbean Getaway. Have some fun in the sun at the Bilai Resort in the DR from August 4 through August 8. Black and white dinner den, karaoke, fun and game, and live entertainment with Super Blue.
Hello, this is Super Blue. I will be in Punta Cana from August 4th to August 8th. Big style.
Kenneth Superset, music by Madman Mary, and more. This is an all-inclusive affair. You don't want to miss it. For information, call Allison at 212-243-0865. That's 212-243-0865. Make that call before it's too late. 212-243-0865. Let's get away.
So welcome back, viewers, listeners, to Globespan 24x7. This is Wednesday, June 22nd. You are watching our regular Wednesday night program, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh, with Devin Bissoon as the technical operator. We are discussing tonight racial dilemma, ethnic dilemma in Guyana, and proposed solutions. Before our break, Dr. Henry Jeffrey was giving us his take on the problem and proposed solution. We'll come back to him. First, let's hear from Dr. Terrence Blackman, who during the break was talking about trust, and as it relates to the story, that wonderful story we just heard about the taxi and the his cab fare. Go ahead,
So
Dr.
Vishnu,
Blackman?
part of what I was saying was that, if we think about the conflict in Guyana, there are these elements. There are the question of governance, the structure of the governance, leadership, the political culture, mistrust, and this is the inability to kind of trust the motives, the contributions of other people, other than those people who are in your group. And that was the point I made. And this story, I think, for me, particularly captured that. Joe Ragnott and Victor Pauli experienced a moment of trust. Joe, as he rightly noted in this moment, said, I don't think I'm going to get the money back. Mr. Pauli had every intention of giving the money back, assuming that he had found the money. And I think that this is the kind of thing that we have to somehow begin to empower, amplify within the context of our society. And I'm a as you note, I'm a mathematician, so I like to list things out. So when I think about who are the people who have to be thinking about the question of trust, who are the stakeholders? Well, there are the two main political parties. There's PPP, Civic, PNCR. The AFC is certainly a part of that group. So the other parties that are small and perhaps not as big, they ought to be a part of that discussion. How do we engender trust? I mean, we've jokingly referred to the impasse around the no confidence motion and so on. I mean, it really ought not to have taken 5 months or 6 months for that matter to have been resolved, had there been some level of bridging between the key political parties so that there was a place where they could talk to each other and come to some common agreements without having to go through this long process of courts and recounting votes, etc. I mean, that was really not, I think, certainly it is part of the process. It worked itself out, but it's because of the absence of trust that was needed. So, how do we engage sort of trust at the level of the national government, the regional government, the local government? How do we engage sort of like civil society actors, imbue civil society actors with trust? When you read the newspapers, there's always a certain kind of cynicism that clearly always goes to thinking about what are the motives of the people who are saying the things that have to be said. The business community, trust in the business community, trust in the academic community. There's a Guyana Ethnic Relations Commission. That's a constitutional. How do we engender trust in that context? Religious leaders, labor unions, in the media, obviously the international community. So I think there's a long list of things, and if we were to attack them in some very specific way, I often think that's what we miss. We're often not going at this in a comprehensive, cohesive fashion, and maybe that's where the mathematician can help you, because I like to make lists and I like to count. So I'll pause there and have my colleagues respond.
Okay, good. So let's hear from Dr. Baytoram Ramharack.
Wait, please.
Yeah, no, Henry. After
I was
Baytoram,
on when. What are you doing? I was on when this thing was cut off. You said I'm going to come back on.
Let's hear briefly from Ramharack and then you. Make it short, please.
What is going on?
We only have 20 minutes left, so we got to fit in everyone.
All right, let me just say quickly.
No trust.
No trust in the moderator.
Yeah, on this question of trust, right? To kind of build on that, I think it's important, and I think everyone here on the show will agree with me that we do need some kind of national dialogue. That has been missing for a while, and I think that's important. It is important for us, regardless of which ethnic community you are from, that you see things from the other side. And this is why we've talked about this whole notion of the ethnic security dilemma. But I want to kind of move away from this whole notion of making this a sort of academic discussion. So in light of that, I do want to suggest, since we're talking about solutions here, so let me offer a couple of things very briefly, without getting into all kinds of details, as to how we can kind of, create this sort of less conflictual society, if not a consociational one that Henry would like to have, at least something, that approximate to that. I've talked about the whole notion of, taking power away from the center and allocating some of that power, to the local communities, real power. An example would have been, let's say, the University of Guyana, where we now have a branch in Berbice. We can extend that. When we talk about this whole notion of devolution of power, federalism, or whatever you want to call it, at that time when we were writing about it, the main critique was, well, it will create overlapping bureaucracies. I think we have the resources today to move in that direction. The second thing I want to throw out there is this whole notion of, this affirmative action, as they call it here in the United States. If the accusation is going to continuously being made against the current government that they are being discriminatory, well, why not have, what we have called ethnic impact statements, where when policies are allocated, you evaluate those policies and you look at the impact of those policies and who are benefiting. Let's say whether it's connected to land or, or homes or whatever the case may be. So that would be something to consider. The other thing I do want to mention, if we're talking about affirmative action and we're talking about real power sharing here and sharing of power, it has to go across the board. It can't just be in the economic sphere. It also has to go in the direction of the institutions where real power lies, meaning things like the bureaucracy, the army, the police, and so on. And one other thing I would like to throw out here, and I think this is where I have a disappointment with Schuman. In this country, we have something, called caucuses, right? We have a Hispanic caucus, we have an African caucus, and so on, in these political parties that's in the legislature. And those parties can provide, important advice and recommendation, right, to government leaders in terms of how to proceed. Right? We don't have something like that in Guyana because we're still dealing with this whole notion of all of us are one. Yes, all of us are one. We have one common goal and so on. But the problem is we come from this whole notion of working class and Marxist orientation that we kind of pummel everybody into one level, and we don't recognize that we have different cultural values and ethnic values and so on. So my sense of power sharing will lie in that direction. Not in saying, okay, you won, let us now hold hands and govern together. I don't think that will work because Indians don't have that majority, and we can't lay that as a solution to a population that now represents 40 as if they are still the majority in the country. And I think if we can look at those solutions, and again, I'm coming back to this whole notion of dialogue, genuine dialogue that is essential, that is necessary, that comes with trust. And I think that's where we have to start. And I think then we can look at those institutional issues that I mentioned, where we can kind of move in that direction of trying to have that society where we can actually live together and we don't have those major conflicts we see erupting at every electoral cycle.
So Professor Jeffrey didn't get a chance to finish his point before the break, and he was the Switzerland solution of cantonment.
You must be
so
trying
go
to
ahead,
make me
please.
forget, I have a feeling. Now, first off, Paul, Mr. Ramharack is totally incorrect. When the PNC was in office, I was out there arguing for shared governance. So it is untrue.
But they didn't listen to you.
Nobody got to do that. Normally, people don't listen to these things. These things end with war. Look at Northern Ireland. Look at Fiji. Look at these places. Essentially, though, you have to be out there making your point that this is the solution. So that is untrue to say that people were not speaking to this question. That's why Anna came up part of it, or at least I become associated, because that was part of Anna's manifesto. The question, you spoke to this thing, Ravi spoke to Northern Ireland. Isn't it better to have a consensual relationship a decision-making process where the two parties can have soft vetoes, not only like in Switzerland, but in Belgium, you have soft vetoes. Northern Ireland, you have soft vetoes that if one ethnic group feels so strongly about an issue, it means that that issue cannot go forward without there's some kind of consensus on it. What's so wrong? That is what has happened in Northern Ireland. That is what the Northern Ireland system says. And the Protestants, they have a problem with Brexit. It's not their own internal problem. They have a problem with Brexit, and they said that they will not continue to go forward unless the issue about Brexit and the place of the United Kingdom trade in Ireland. This is not their own problem. So effectively, I want to know why you feel that majoritarianism is the end all and do all of governance. Why you feel Arthur Lewis never said that. You say Arthur Lewis said what Arthur Lewis said. Arthur Lewis said that the majority rule cannot be democracy when you have a whole lot of people out there. They should have a right to have a say in the development and making the policies as you go forward. That is the essence of what should happen in Guyana. And this notion, as I said before, that you can just sit down and, we are going to wait. And, we're going to build trust. Trust is built as we work together. You need to have the two people, the two ethnic groups in a system working together as they go forward, and then trust will be built. Trust don't build when one party is consistently in a conflict with the others. And that is precisely what's happening in Guyana. So you essentially cannot move Guyana forward if you want to keep the majoritarianism. And everybody that's sensible that has looked at this system says that. The Americans have said it recently in terms of their report from the State Department, that for Guyana to develop a sensible, a functional democracy, you must drop majoritarianism. They said so, not me, and they got some of the smartest people and with long institutional memory there. Long institutional memory, right there.
I think the point is made. Let's hear Ravi there now.
You do not want to. That is the problem.
Henry, you were asking for deadlock in government. That's what you're asking
for. Deadlock in which government?
See, my good friend Henry.
Deadlock in government. You are asking for majoritarianism.
My good friend Henry.
Let's hear Ravi.
My good friend Henry is speaking of and building castles in the air and counting the number of angels on the head of a pin. Let's talk the real world, Henry, here. The real world. Let's come back to Northern Ireland.
Yes.
Northern Ireland can afford to be deadlocked for 2-3 years because they are ruled by England. So when they are deadlocked, as they are now, the government
in London.
That is
untrue.
That is untrue.
When Northern Ireland is deadlocked,
it won 2000.
That is untrue.
2007.
When Northern Ireland is deadlocked as it is now, the government still exists in Northern Ireland.
Exists.
The government is no, come on, they can't make new laws, but they are not deadlocked. They are deadlocked only in the sense that they can't make new laws. So don't make up all these stories and come and tell people nonsense, Ravi. Come on.
Go back
better than that.
The point is, right now, for example, DUP has said they ain't voting until they get their Brexit thing. So, but let me come on. What I'm saying,
the Northern Ireland government still exists. They can't make new law, but the government is there running the country. Good. They are running the country, but new laws, and you don't have to make new laws every day. So effectively, the government is there running Northern Ireland.
Henry, okay, Ravi, move on with your point.
No, what I'm saying then is that there's the big objection to this castle building, Henry, is adoptability. Who will adopt it? You've been within the PPP. I have been outside of it. neither of these two major parties will adopt the kind of power sharing you're calling for. So what you're saying, we have to go at the very best with what we have, which is that we have a situation.
Come on. You have to fight for what you want, Ravi. What's the matter with you?
I let you talk.
And what you have is the majoritarian system that you want. Because he's talking nonsense.
We don't have a majoritarian system since 2015.
No, the majoritarian system is precisely there. All you are saying, one party can have the majority, but you still have a majoritarian system. And I cannot believe it. You believe what you and I should be fighting for, Ravi, is what's good for Guyana, not what the PNC and the PPP want.
But here, we can only hear what you have to start from where you are at, Henry, not from where you want to be. We have to start from where we're at. Here we are in 2022. We have to start from where we are at. Where we are at,
we are in disaster. We are fighting on the streets.
Can I talk, Henry? I am moderator. You're not controlling this thing, man.
All right. Go on.
Henry,
but you're saying this
thing that
you know is not true, and I know you know it's not true. You can't start anything where we are at. Guyana's been a disaster.
Henry, let him finish your point. You get a chance.
That's where you better start. You tried to stop me from talking just now, so you can't even talk, Vishnu. So come on.
Go ahead, Ravi.
Where we are at right now is that the PPP was able to get 2 seats more, I believe, than the PNC because they had a particular program where they were able to persuade people from outside of their core ethnic group.
But you have one seat.
I am saying, boy, let me talk now.
Yeah, but when you all been trying to cut me off just all the time.
What mean you
are? No, Henry. No, Henry. Come on, man. Let's get serious. Go ahead.
So what I'm saying, in 2015, in 2011 and 2015, the policy that I pushed in the pages of the Chronicle and the Starbuck News, which is that if the PNC were to moderate its stance, don't come out into the streets, they can win that election. And Henry, this is not conjecture. It happened. And they were able to govern. Nobody came out into the streets to overthrow them. The heavens did not fall. All I'm saying at this juncture
here, you said a rigged election.
Here,
let him finish his point, and then you'll make your point.
Nobody came out there. So we have a situation here. We are saying that, and I'm very serious. You see, here again is the same point being made theoretically, that the PNC will not be able to get quote-unquote Indian votes. Henry, let me tell you, I work every day in this constituency at the grassroots. I live in a home here. When I came out from the Logi, I am in Iflut where it's grounded. You can't get more grounded than me, all right? So what I'm saying there's this assumption that the PPP doesn't have any kind of problems within, quote unquote, their own constituency. I am saying it's the same thing that prevailed in 2015 is prevailing now. There are a lot of people who are looking askance at them. But if the PNC again are going to come on big and bad, you're not going to be able to get those people to come aboard. You can't do what Mr. Granger did, which is to wipe out those people that AFC brought into it and expect to win elections. I am saying, and I'm very clear about this, I believe that we are in a situation now, rather fortuitously, that because of immigration, that each party now, as proposed in the type of power sharing I'm talking about, has to court vote from across the divide, and therefore they have to moderate their stance. And that is a positive development for Guyana. And I'm very happy that Mr. Norton seems to be holding the line there and is not coming out into the streets to chase away anyone, that the PNC is just going to be the big bad wolf anymore. Thank you.
Listen,
There.
we
You
are not.
couldn't get
One
Indian
second. One
votes.
second.
You could not get Indian votes. The PNC can get them. You can't get them. And that has been nothing.
I got 5,000
Gentlemen, let's hear
I got
Dr.
5,000 votes.
And you are the Indian.
We've got 4 minutes left. Let's hear Dr. Blackman, please.
I had 5,000 votes.
Ravi, yield to Dr. Blackman. Dr. Blackman.
I think this discussion makes clear that this kind of, you know, this ethnically driven sort of power struggle is the centerpiece of the politics in Guyana. So when you lose the elections, it's not just about, you know, changing the national management arrangements, but it's kind of giving up the control of the government, the power, the access, but more not just giving it up, but you're giving it up to your rival ethnicity, so to speak, right? And I think in a way
it's a valid point, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, and that's why I go back to the POP surveys. You know, I think if we have to begin to think what sort of framework do we need for, you know, developing for some cohesion building. And I think both Henry and Ravi are correct, right? So Ravi is arguing what I think reasonable people should argue, which is that at some point the PNC has to appeal to some part of the Indian electorate in the same manner that the PPP has to appeal to some part of the African electorate in a proper political system. Whether this will happen tomorrow, and I think Henry is sort of given up on the possibility of this ever happening. He's saying this can't happen. But I think we just to use my argument is let's not use all of our energy here, right? So there are these real things that we can do. We can do things in health. We can do things in education. We can achieve this same gaining of understanding of our situation and working with each other in health, in education, in trying to develop our infrastructure, in trying to, you know, do the sort of things that make us a better country, that both of the political parties should agree on. I think we're not going to find a way in trying to resolve the sort of political strife. As everyone is saying, you know, whoever wins the 51 is unwilling to invite the other party in. And so at some point, I think we're forced to have a politics where if you want the 51, you're going to have to appeal to a larger electorate if you are 40% and you don't have 51% yourself. And you know, that's my basic point. I think we have to move beyond that to begin to think about how to create an enabling environment so that Guyanese feel a part of Guyana and feel committed to Guyana. Guyanese are still emigrating, or university educated people are still moving. So the stability that you need is not going to come just from the political side, but from the building of those institutions. And this is where I think we have to move the direction. You know, you started with the program with Juneteenth. This is only the second year of the Juneteenth celebrations in America. Slavery was abolished in 1865. It's only now in 2021, 2022 that there is an official federal recognition. So I think we have to be realistic about what we can achieve in terms of changing the structure of our politics, but I think we can achieve more within the context of the institutions, the context of our schools, our universities, our unions, etc. I think that's my contribution to the argument.
Okay, so listen, it's time. It's 9 o'clock now. We should be closing up.
60 years. And it has not happened. We are the poorest, although we have the most resources. You are the one that started this, you know, Mr. Chairman. Good.
Okay, so Henry, we cannot finish the discussion tonight. So what I'm proposing is that we come back some other time. I'll ask.
Invite me again, please don't.
Okay.
You are certainly not proposing that. Yes.
Henry, I don't know why you're upset, because everyone.
I am upset because you try to cut me off and passing.
No. I'm trying to give equal time.
You did it, man. Stop the nonsense. Anybody?
No. I'm trying to give equal time to everyone.
Really.
But I think it's a very interesting discussion. We didn't get to finish what we want to discuss tonight. There were some questions. There were some polling questions that the techie operator would like to share with us the results, the findings. Devin, you have them?
Yes. So the first question that we asked our audience was, does Guyana have a serious race problem? 72% responded yes, 28% responded no. The second question was, well, this was a three-choice question. Is race relations better? 29% responded better. Is race relations worse? 33% responded worse. And is race relations the same? 38% responded the same. Yes.
Go on.
The third question was, should there be ethnic impact statements at regular intervals? 59% said yes, 41% said no. And the last question was, should race relations in USA be a model for Guyana? 17% responded yes, 83% responded no.
That tells us they don't have faith in the US either. So, listen, gentlemen, I'm sorry we're out of time, but I would like to continue this conversation some other time. I don't know when. I regret Henry Jeffrey feel that I'm biased towards him. I thought he got the most. I thought he got the most time out of all. If we check, if we do a minute count, I think Henry Jeffrey would have gotten the most time. So, gentlemen, again, thank you all very, very much for taking a very, very important time away from your busy schedule and for joining us tonight.
Can I ask Henry a question? Let me ask Henry one question before we
Yes.
Henry,
I have a question.
Going back to what Dr. Blackman said.
You have a question too?
Oh boy.
It's a math question.
Yes. Let's say Ravi, because we don't have time, right? No.
20 years ago, Henry called me to Georgetown Club, if you remember this, Henry, and you brought in some person from abroad that we need to construct a narrative, a national narrative in Guyana. And that's 20-something years ago. You don't remember that?
Yeah, of course.
So the point I want to make is this, Henry, that you and I are...
You're asking me a question or you're making a point?
No, I'm proposing something. I'm saying you and I are in Guyana here, right? And I am proposing to you that you and I pick this up on that, if you still agree that we need a national narrative which combines both sides, what we are feeling, and I would like to work with you on that. And I will give you equal time. I won't do what Bisram, you claim Bisram did. What Bisram is a legend.
Before Henry responds, let's hear Ramharack, and he will respond to both at the same time.
No,
Ramharack, your question?
Disagree, but I think Henry have some, he's a smart guy, and I love being on a discussion with him. But I'm going to ask Professor Blackman to convince Henry that 40 is not the majority of 51. I leave it at that.
The best country in the world to live is Switzerland, and they don't run anything by majority.
Okay.
And Ravi, right. The four parties that get most form the government. So don't worry with that. Now, Ravi, what you're asking there is a nice thing. Maybe me and you can reach every so often and have a chat, but it go nowhere. You see, essentially, unless, and it will go nowhere. I mean, what are we going to do? We're going to go out there, we're going to make what dialogue to do what? Essentially, this problem is about government. You have to have the two ethnic groups governing this country somehow together. No one party should have 51 and go and do what they like with the resources of Ghana.
But I do think Henry has a valid point. 51% should not exclude 49% from governance. It really cannot work in Guyana. In spite of what we say that the 49% can reach across to try to make.
You got fish on the run, Henry.
It really cannot.
That's what you call it. No, fish is not on the run. It's a reality, and you know it. You know that's the reality. We've been doing this for how long, Ravi? How long?
So gentlemen, I got to end the recording. We can continue the conversation afterwards. Exactly. But gotta go. Some people have to go. Devin, if you want, you can end the recording. I want to thank you all very much for taking a very, very important time tonight from your program to join with us tonight. Thank you, and good night to all.